Today we have the guest speakers, Shri B.M. Rao from NHAI, Shri Abhinav Mittal from Yog Infra, and we have with us the CEO of Gawad Construction Limited, Shri Yogesh Mahajan. For a formal introduction of the speakers, Shri B.M. Rao and Shri Abhinav Mittal, I request Shri Shailendra Mohanji to introduce our august speakers to today's gathering.
Thank you, Puneet. For today's speaker, Shri B.M. Rao. He is in NHAI and Chief General Manager Finance there. He has 34 years of experience in finance, account, costing, material management, purchase and store management, business process, re-engineering, SAP, REP implementation, computerization, industrial engineering, and teaching of finance, industrial economic, and industrial engineering subjects. Today, other speaker is Shri Abhinav Mittal. Abhinav Mittal is having a vast experience in infrastructure. He is the founder and managing director of Yog Infra. Abhinav is founder and managing director of Yog Infra, which is an infrastructure-focused financial advisory firm with offices in Singapore and India. Abhinav has more than 11 years of experience in infrastructure, PPP transaction, and financial advisory across varied infrastructure sectors like power, renewable energy, water, waste management, transport, urban infrastructure, real estate, and social infrastructure. His geographic experience span across South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and Middle East. Prior to Yog Infra, he has worked with PwC in India and Singapore as part of infrastructure advisory team. He has experience in PPP transaction advisory with experience in bid documentation and bid process management under international competitive bidding framework. Financial advisory for infrastructure project to support in financial restructuring advisory, valuation review, and financial modeling, including model audits. Project financing support for financing option assessment and debt raising from commercial bank for PPP infrastructure project. Commercial due diligence, including review of transaction structure, contract review, and risk framework. Strategic business plan, including market entry strategy and investment target, search based on client specific need, sector, country, size of investment, target return. Thus, he has a wide range of experience in infrastructure. This is the basically introduction of the today learned speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailendra. Thanks a lot. रोहित जी, अब मैं आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा for a welcome address of our panelists, speakers, and all the august audiences who have joined us. Rohit ji is the past president and advisory board member of Bharatiya Vitt Salahkar Samiti. Rohit ji.
Thank you, Puneet ji, for giving me this opportunity, and congratulations to Team BVSS for hosting this webinar and such a new topic which is being discussed here. Basically, we keep on discussing the technical issues and technical topics which are related to day-to-day compliance of the professional. And our motto in BVSS being capacity building for the MSMP, medium and small practitioners, and they are catering the 90% of the clientele of the business clientele, mainly because they belongs to a category where more and more support is required for the business class. And this topic being the new topic for me, I am not expert in the domain, but on behalf of the BVSS Advisory Board, BVSS Executive Board, and all of the members and friends, I welcome all of you in this webinar, and I hope that I will learn here something and we all will learn something here. Thank you very much.
थैंक यू रोहित जी। अब हमारे साथ गोपाल जी भी जुड़ गए, उन्हें कुछ टेक्निकल इशू आ रहा था। गोपाल जी हमारे इकोनॉमिक थिंक टैंक ग्रुप के कन्वीनर हैं और दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में आप प्रोफेसर हैं। गोपाल जी, मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि रोहित जी के वेलकम एड्रेस के बाद आप 1 मिनट 2 मिनट अपने इकोनॉमिक थिंक टैंक के बारे में थोड़ा सा हमारे स्पीकर्स को और पैनलिस्ट को बताएं, then we will move and start with the program.
Thank you very much, Punitji. Sorry for joining late. There was some technical issue. And I welcome Mr. Yogesh Mahajan, Mr. B.M. Rao, Mr. Abhinav Mittal, field experts. And BVSS has been carrying on these programs to sensitize the professionals, as Rohitji said, that he also wants to learn on that, on these economic issues. And as a matter of fact, during the COVID time also, we had a lot of programs, how we can alleviate the, how we can actually, I can say, mitigate the hardships that is being caused by, that is being faced by different segments. On the today's program, I just will take 1 minute that ever since in August 21, this National Monetization Pipeline Program was announced by the government. I have also been thinking that this is an area which has been not discussed, even among the academic fraternities and the professionals. It has more or less right now been confined to, the field experts only. So the BVSS has taken this initiative to bring it in the domain of finance professionals. And I would actually like to extend it further in the academic fields also. We all know that after the independence, the public sector enterprises, a lot of capacity building was there. But it is also a fact that there was also a criticism of underutilization of these resources. So in that context, I believe that as an alternative to disinvestment, this plan of national monetization of the strategic sectors, this is an idea whose time has actually come, and we are fortunate to have the field experts amongst us. So I will not take much time. I will only say that we would like to hear from you what are the expectations from the industry and what is the government's perspective. However, a few points like what will be the valuation model, how will you evaluate at the correct monetization value, and then also issues like dispute resolution and how to ensure that there is transparency, in the whole exercise. So these are some of the issues on which we would like to be enlightened. So with that few words, I welcome once again, our distinguished panelists, and thank you very much, Punitji, for giving me this brief opportunity to express myself. Thanks.
Thank you, Gopal ji. आपने बड़े अच्छे perspectives और questions raise किए. And I think why should they not be raised? National monetization pipeline with 6 lakh crores has targeted amount to be received, out of which almost 20+% from road infrastructure, and a huge amount of 26,700 kilometers of roads proposed to be monetized. And every year 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers further roads to be created for the purpose of monetization. And this money being further pumped into the infrastructure sector. This entire exercise seems to be a promising one, laying down further growth story for the infrastructure and ultimately for the country as a whole and for the businesses to develop. After all, we all understand that infrastructure is the lifeblood for any economy. So let us understand that more. And before we move on to our first technical session with Mr. Rao, I request, we have with us Shri Yogesh Mahajan. He is the CEO of a prominent real infrastructure player, Gawad Construction Limited, himself a finance professional, a chartered accountant. I would request Yogesh ji to give from industry's perspective, what are your expectations and how do you look at it? Kindly throw some light on that.
थैंक यू पुनीत जी. आप सभी को मेरा नमस्कार. सर, मोनेटाइजेशन ऑफ एसेट्स की अगर हम बात करते हैं, गवर्नमेंट को कोई भी डेवलपमेंट करने के लिए फंड्स की जरूरत होती है. अगर वो फंड्स हेलो पुनीत जी, आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
जी, आपकी आवाज आ रही है. And may I request other panelists to kindly mute their mics, please.
सर मैं ये बोल रहा था, मोनेटाइजेशन ऑफ एसेट्स का इतना अच्छा सिस्टम गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने अभी प्रपोज किया है, जिससे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट की बहुत बड़ी नीड सॉल्व हो जाएगी। कोई भी डेवलपमेंट करने के लिए गवर्नमेंट को फंड्स की रिक्वायरमेंट होती है। फंड्स आइदर टैक्सिंग गवर्नमेंट को मिलेगा, या फिर डेफिशिएट के तौर पे लास्ट में गवर्नमेंट के पास रह जाएगा। अगर गवर्नमेंट की एसेट्स को गवर्नमेंट प्राइवेट प्लेयर को देकर फॉर सम यूज ओनली, फॉर सर्टेन पीरियड ओनली, फॉर सर्टेन कैश ओनली, और वापस गवर्नमेंट के पास चला जाए, तो इससे अच्छी बात और क्या होगी सर? तो मेरे हिसाब से तो मोनेटाइजेशन की प्लानिंग बहुत अच्छी प्लानिंग है सर।
Thank you, Yogesh ji. I think in simple words, you put the perspective of the industry. Now we move on to Shri B.M. Rao ji, the eminent speaker from NHAI. I think there could have been no better person to put perspective to the infrastructure sector monetization, especially in the road sector. Shri B.M. Rao ji, now I request you to kindly start your deliberation.
Namaste. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity. I will share some slides are there, presentation. I will explain that one. Afterwards, we can discuss on this. Are you able to see the presentation, Puneet ji? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We
You
can
are
see
able
that.
to see?
Yes.
Okay. So this is regarding this asset monetization. And as everyone aware of that, Government of India is having ambitious plan of 6 trillion over a 4 years period through asset monetization. Here, as everyone awares that asset monetization involves creation of new sources of revenue by unlocking the value of either to underutilized assets. That means whatever assets are there, these assets are being underutilized or unutilized. We want to have new sources of income, and especially wherever the assets are there, like public sector and government departments like NHA, these are being used for asset monetization. These assets categorized into lands and buildings, brownfield assets, financial assets, and other assets. Main benefits of asset monetization, if you take it, government parts with asset for a specified period of time in exchange of lump sum payment. Here, at the end of the period, the assets will return to the government. Unlike in privatization, the asset will go to the private people, whereas in case of asset monetization, only the right for collecting, say in case of roads, revenue will go to the private people for a specified period of time, and again it will come back to government. So there is no sale of government assets is involved in this one. And the main advantage here is by monetizing assets, government can earn revenues to build more infrastructure. That means, say for example, by monetization, if I am getting say 5,000 crores, that amount I can use for building new more roads. To get that 5,000, I need not wait say 20 years or so. So that whatever income we are getting through monetization, it can be used for building new assets. Those assets also can be monetized. Mainly another thing is it unlocks the value in brownfield projects by engaging the private sector, transferring to them the revenue rights and not ownership on the projects by using the funds generated for infrastructure creation. Here, brownfield projects means already if the project is running, say for example, a 4-lane project is there. On 4-lane project, we are collecting the revenue, toll revenue. If you monetize such projects, these are called brownfield projects. Greenfield projects means ekdam new alignment. Say for example, Delhi to Mumbai Expressway we are constructing. That is a greenfield project. Greenfield project means new alignment is totally new. Brownfield project means already some road is existing. Over that road, there will be some upgradation. Main advantages of benefits of asset monetization, there are 3 stakeholders. One is government, another is private people, and ultimately the citizens. The main advantage the government is because of the asset monetization. Here we are monetizing the rights for a specified period of time, not the ownership. Again, after completion of the transaction period, say we have done for say 20 years, again that asset will come to the government at the end of that period. And another advantage is it taps the efficiency in the private sector. The efficiency of the private sector in operations and management of infrastructure can be used through this asset monetization. it is very clearly told you it is a distinction from privatization and slump sale of assets than the asset monetization. There is a lot of difference here. In case of privatization or disinvestment, that entity will go to the private people, whereas in case of asset monetization, the right for a certain period of time will go to the private people. After the end of that period, again it will come to the government. That is the main distinction between asset monetization and privatization or say disinvestment. The main private sector, the main advantage is because of this asset monetization, already these assets are revenue earning assets. So these are all stable projects. There is no risk of construction risk is not there. And we can facilities like program like Make in India and Startup India contribute towards overall growth of economy and economic activities country. Because by asset monetization, we are getting the upfront revenue or income, we can say, for say concession period is at 20 years, the 20 years amount upfront we are getting today itself. With that one we are using for development in further roads. So there will be overall growth in economy and economic activities of the country will increase. As you know, with the increase in the road construction, there will be a lot of increase in the economic activity because so many laborers will be provided the day-to-day works, and there will be usage of cement, concrete, and iron and steel and everything, so that the relevant sectors also getting developed. Main the advantage citizens is employment opportunities and enhancing the infrastructure for better ease of living. And as far as NH is concerned, there are two ways, you can say three ways also, but as far as asset monetization is concerned, two ways only. The main means of asset monetization is toll operate transfer and infrastructure investment trust. In case of toll operate transfer, all the public funded national highway projects that are operational and having a toll revenue history for 1 year, that those means those who are completed commercial operation can be used for TOT model. That means here construction is completed, COD is issued, and revenue history is there for a period of 1 year. And in case of InvIT, it is almost similar to mutual. It enables direct investment of small amounts of money from possible individual or institutional investors in infrastructure to earn a small portion of the income as a return. The main the difference in TOT or InvIT, in TOT only large players can only participate, whereas in case of InvIT, it is equal. It's almost similar to mutual fund. If we go for a private public issue, even small investors also can participate in the in investment. And as far as NH is concerned, already we have done asset monetization from last 2 years by using the TOT. Here, in case of this one TOT, NHA passes on the toll collection rights and O&M obligations for a period of say 15 to 30 years for the private developers against the payment of upfront one-time and lump sum concession fee. The private player will have a right to collect the toll revenue and is supposed to maintain the road for the specified period of time. And because of this one, there is an operational efficiency through dedicated O&M players. And there is an opportunity for long-term global investors like pension fund, asset managers, etc. And because these projects are being maintained by the private players, so there will be a requirement of private project, this one intermediaries like independent engineers, statutory auditors, because you see here, because of the asset monetization, if you see, once the construction is completed and we are collecting the toll revenue, with the asset monetization, what is happening is the financially recycling is happening. So there will be many opportunities for finance professionals. Suppose not only financial, even technical also, when we are going for asset monetization, we are engaging the engineers, that is DPR consultants for technical due diligence, and we are utilizing the traffic consultant to study the traffic and growth prospects also. And there will be transaction advisors. And once the InvIT is formed or TOT is formed, there will be so many SPVs. Each SPV will have an entire setup, and auditors are required, statutory auditors required, internal auditors required. Suppose in case of InvIT, there were so many other entities also there. So here, low risk road, stable history, and low upgradation requirement. And this is mainly because of the extensive technical assessment, sharing of the raw data. If you take the figures last financial years, We have already awarded 18-19 May 9,600, totally roughly about 1,700 crores already we have awarded, and about 10 distinctive bidders participated in this one. And now we are developing a pipeline of projects. Now studies under consideration by DPR consultant and technical for about 5,000 kilometers. These studies are in progress. Based on the outcome, we will decide what are all the projects should go to TOT, what are all the projects will go to InvIT mode. And these are the TOT packages under bidding. TOT 6 bundle, that is Shivpuri Jhansi and Agra bypass. Bundle 7, TOT bundle Eastern Peripheral Expressway near Delhi. And TOT bundle 8 is Bhubaneswar Puri and Maharashtra Telangana border. These 3 bundles already bidded. The last date for submission of bids is 15th November. If you see the TOT history of NHA, earlier we used to have say 400 to 500 kilometers length of roads. Now it is restricted to, suppose TOT bundle 6 if you take, it is about 108 kilometers. TOT bundle 7 is 135 and TOT bundle 8 is about 180 or so. So that means by decreasing the length of the stretches, even small players also can participate in the bidding. So there will be more investors. That is about the InvIT. That is about, sorry, TOT. If you take the InvIT as a asset monetization, it is a typical structure. Here there are 5 entities. One is the sponsorer, and another is the trust, and then next one is the investment manager, and the project SPV and project manager. Here, suppose I will tell you in NHA some 5 projects already we have submitted the placement memorandum SEBI. It has come in today's in the Economic Times also. Issue is getting opened tomorrow. Tomorrow, this one to raise about 8,000 crores. Here, the trustees, our IDBI trustee, we have selected the 5 projects. The 5 projects are clubbed under one SPV, that projects SPV, and we are having investment manager in key entity in InvIT is the investment manager. He will maintain the day-to-day activities of the InvIT. And there will be a project manager. In case of NHA InvIT, NHA itself is the project manager. The responsibility of the project manager is maintaining, O&M is the responsibility of the project manager. And as a sponsor, we have to keep 15% for a period of 3 years. NHA is the sponsor. About 390 kilometers, we are going for this InvIT ke liye. InvIT, the typical structure is 5 entities: sponsor, trustee, investment manager, project manager, and project SPV. So we have already almost 1 year back, we have started the process, and this launch done, and tomorrow it is opening. We are aiming for 5,100 crores. And according to credit ratings, it is 25,000 to 40,000. Next periods we are going to monetize, and especially we are planning for 5,000 kilometers studies during this year. Next year 5,000 kilometers. It is totally in alignment with the Government of India plans for monetizing the assets. But what are all the projects go for InvIT and what are all the projects go for TOT will be decided based on the valuation and market appetite and all those things. So practically in asset monetization, NHA is having excellent experience compared to any other organization, because we have proved in TOT, and already InvIT, already we have submitted the placement memorandum SEBI, and tomorrow it is launching. So the end object you can say is infrastructure is public and private collaborate, each excelling in their core areas of competition so as to deliver socio-economic growth and quality of life to the country's citizens. Here, as I told you, the main advantage is there. Suppose, for example, say one road we are getting say 100 crores, so is the toll revenue, say for 1 year period. Say for 10 years, we may get 1,000 crores. Say for example, 20 years, 2,000 crores. So through asset monetization, whatever amount we are going to get through a toll revenue for a next period of say 20 years, through valuation, we are arriving the figure how much the value it carries at this date. So based on that one, whatever amount we are going to collect through toll revenue for a next 20 years, we are getting at the moment through as an upfront payment. that we are using for developing the other sectors, so that parallelly we can develop other roads also by using this asset monetization. So in this asset monetization way, I can tell you that there is a lot of improvement in the socio-economic growth of the country. At the same time, there will be lot many opportunities for, especially for finance people, because once till the construction of road, yes, there will be a scope for the say technical people, and even after that one also there will be O&M. Whereas in case of asset monetization, once the project is there, then the project is whether it will go to TOT or InvIT. So much of financial restructuring is taking place. So with this one, there will be lot many opportunities for the finance professionals. So another thing I want to add, almost from November onwards, we are going to bid for TOT KLA, because so in more about 2,000 kilometers, I can say we are already getting the information and we are working on that one, because nowadays we are busy with this InvIT. Now it has come to one conclusive end. Next month onwards, we are focusing on this one, segregating the roads. What are all the roads used for TOT and what are all the roads for InvIT KLA. There is in pre-bid meetings also for TOT 6 and 7 and 8. There is a lot of response from the prospective bidders. And one more thing I want to add is because of the COVID now, there will be a lot of liquidity in the market. Banks are ready to finance the TOT projects, whoever concessionaire gets that one. Because in TOT projects, it is easy for the bankers also. The main thing is stable revenue is there. There is no construction risk. And there is a previous history of toll revenue. Even concession agreement of TOT also, in case of any default, the whatever this one termination payment is there, it is linked with the balance value of the concession agreement. So risk factors are very minimal. So it will have a great success in future. With that anticipation, NHA is moving ahead, and we are planning to have road shows sometime during November also, along with the prospective bidders. And one more thing we want to add in the road shows also, not only prospective bidders, we want to involve the bankers also, because if NHA tells to the bankers stating that these are all the projects we are going for, either InvIT or TOT KLA, and this is the expected revenue from them, generally they will have more faith on whatever figures we are giving than getting it from the concessionaires. So with this one, we are moving ahead. In future, we are hoping that whatever Government of India ambitious plans are there, we are able to meet that one. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. You were absolutely on point and covered a wide variety of topics. You have given a very nice bird view picture of the plans of NHAI, also the different roles that finance professionals can play. So, Mr. Rao, can you put a little more light on what specific capacity buildings can be done by finance professionals, which can help into this future forays for opening up the professional opportunities in this monetization part? Of course, you have pointed out towards internal audits and statutory audits. These are the routine forays or the domains in which chartered accountants and other finance professionals have definitely been functioning. But what are those specific capacity buildings? You may highlight some of those for the benefit of our viewers.
Number one, sir, main thing is valuation. When we are going for asset monetization, based on the historical data of the traffic, we have to value that one. In that valuation, yes, technical people will give the details like technical in future, what is the maintenance cost, everything. But as a finance professional, we will have larger say in the valuation of the asset. In future, what is the valuation of the asset? That is the one more thing. And second thing is this one, the professionals should have acquaintance with these concession agreements also. What are the TOT concession agreements? What improvements can be made? And suppose, for example, say, concession, once the project is awarded, they have to sign the concession agreement. So the finance professionals should have thorough knowledge in the concession agreements. And their improvements also they can suggest. What are all improvements are required in this one? And finance professionals, because presently these financial consultants are playing a role, but actually professionals should take a lead. Refinancing, suppose for example, once say X firm has won the bid TOT, afterwards X firm want to sell that stake from to Y firm. So they should have the knowledge regarding the concession agreements. What are all the conditions are there for changing the equity, for change of the ownership. And one more thing is that everyone aware of that in private, so many InvITs are coming. And once the project is any concessionaire won through InvIT, after some time, he wants to sell that project to some InvIT. Some InvIT, so many InvITs are coming, some Cube Highways like that. So here also, actually, I am seeing especially finance people are playing very minimal role. This is an opportunity for them to study that one, refinancing, equity change, conversion of a company, say from ownership changing from this TOT to InvIT. These are all the opportunities for them.
One more question, Mr. Rao. There must be arbitration clauses in these agreements.
Yes, arbitration clauses are there.
So are we, as NHAI, are we putting clauses of commercial arbitration based upon a selection of arbitrator, or is it institutionalized arbitration that we are selecting?
No, actually institutional only, but actually this is here, as I told you, the model concession agreement, there is an interministerial group is there, consisting of, say, Ministry of Road Transport, Department, Ministry of Finance, Niti Aayog, Department of Ministry of Labor. So they will they are deciding the MCS, model concession agreement, and whatever arbitration and everything is there is as per law only. And nowadays there are so many improvements also made in MCA, because it is not a fixed, based on the over a period of time when we are implementing it, we will come across so many issues. We are go on resolving it.
All right. Any other member of this August panel, if you want to ask any question to Mr. Rao? Abhinav, do you have any?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you for the very insightful session. I just have one question regarding, you mentioned that the agreements are evolving over time as well. And you mentioned a few points. For example, earlier there were very large bundles of 600 kilometers or 500 kilometers. Now they're reducing into size to 100 to 200 so that more people can participate. And we see that, yes, there is a interest from wide variety of people. So yes, you have investors and you have developers as well. So based on your understanding, when developers are coming in to take these assets, what is the key motivation for them? Because they are the ones who actually need capital for developing projects, right? Why are they actually coming in to give upfront money to for these monetization and then take it over the operation? So where do you think they are in? What is their benefit in taking this?
You see, here the main advantage in asset monetization, whoever is their developer, if he wants to take that, there is no construction risk. There is no construction risk. From the day one, he start getting the revenue.
Correct.
Because whatever toll projects are there, this one, our commercial operation date ke baad 1 year established, this one is there, toll revenue history is there. So there is no construction risk at all. And for that developers, that means concessionaire, it is easy for them to get fund from the bankers also. In case of say construction of projects, the main thing is that there is a risk element is there. There is a risk element of delay in construction and all those things. So that's why it will attract. And one more thing, in case of TOT, see, presently all the public funded projects, toll plazas are maintained by the contractor, concessionaires. Contracts say for a period of 1 year or 2 years long. So if you give in a small, say 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers, the 2-3 toll contractors, so they can form a company, they can bid for it. So there will be so many players in this way.
So it's more to increase competition and see get more value of the same asset for the same asset. Right. And I think particularly, this is a very good point. I think for developers, the opportunity is also because when they come in, if they're able to refinance the existing debt on those assets, if any, or if they are to, that is one scope where they can actually earn returns. And also during operation, if they're able to bring those efficiencies, then also I think there's an opportunity for them.
That is there.
Thank you.
That is the main advantage.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Rao?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to hear me? Yeah, good. Thank you
Yes, sir.
very
Yes,
much.
sir.
In fact, you have explained it in very simple language for us. A couple of things. What kind of time frame we are looking, how for like it's going to be a couple of decades, or what is going to be the time period, the revenue stream that we discussed that has to be monetized? This is the first thing. So how do you think that we can accurately identify the revenue stream? This is one thing which I have in mind. And the second question which I have is, because we discussed a lot about the toll plaza. Now, given the kind of democracy which we have, now say for example, there is a toll at you see Sonipat, Sindhu border, and then you have a full 1 year of farmers protest and things of that nature. So how do you foresee to kind of settle these kind of issues? So that's why I actually indicated on that a robust dispute resolution mechanism in the whole thing, because that is going to be the key to that. So these two questions for the time being, please, if you can kindly, the time frame that you are looking for the revenue stream and the dispute resolution, and especially issues like toll plaza, etc.
Sir. So main things are this one, next 3 to 4 years, whatever Government of India plans are there, we want to monetize the public funded toll plazas, and the concession period is from 20 to 30 years. So in case of TOT, we are proposing most of them is 20 years only. In case of Invent, yesterday tomorrow it is going to launch, it is for 30 years. So depending upon the projections of the revenue, we are taking maximum is 30 years and minimum is 20 years. And the next 3 to 4 years, we want to complete most of the public funded projects. As far as toll loss is concerned, due to farmer strike and all those things, actually internally, yeah, we are having committees to assess the toll loss, and even concession agreement also based on the earlier, actually, say for example, 2021 May, say 100 crores we are getting the toll plaza, toll collection, and next year is projections is based on the growth factor. That means how much traffic we are expecting, and there is a combination of formulas are there, WPI and CPI. Based on that one, we are arriving the projected figures. So this, whatever you, as you told, whatever this toll loss is there due to farmer strike, we're working out internally. There is a dispute mechanism is there in NHMA. We're having CCIE committee, core committee of independent experts from different streams. They are making both the parties, concessionaire and the NHA, to sit together to arrive the amicable solutions. So of course, as you said, it has to be further strengthened, but still we are having that CCA. There are about 3 CCA committees are there. They are working for conciliation. They are putting their conciliation efforts for settlement, out of court settlement through mutual agreement. Yes, of course, there may not many improvements also required.
Mr. Rao, we have with us our advisory board member, very senior chartered accountant, Shri Anil Sharma ji. He is the ex-director of UCO Bank and also member of National Financial Reporting Authority. He has a question for you.
Please.
Yeah, Mr. Rao, sorry, I joined a little late. See, I have a few questions to you. First of all, how this new approach, NMP, is different from the earlier version where, see, this PPP model was being used for roads. This is first. Second is, in the concept paper, we have seen that for the road, to arrive at monetization value, it is mentioned that market approach has been adopted. So can you please explain that, and why market approach? Why not other approaches like CAPEX and see, maybe some other approach can also be there. And third is, see, these days we have all these fast tags in our vehicles. How those collection is going to be linked to the respective person who is going to take that particular patch of road under his operation. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Sir, mainly you can say the difference between NMP and PPP. In case of PPP, the investors are coming, say, either BOT or HAM projects they are doing the construction. Suppose in case of BOT toll, they are doing the construction. After completion of the construction, whatever the cost they have incurred for developing the road, over a period of time, they will have right to collect the toll. So that is the PPP model. And in that one, the main problem in this one, in that one is there is a chance of construction risk. Suppose, for example, if there is a delay in completion of the project, their revenues will be affected. That risk is there in PPP. Whereas in case of National Monetization Plan, this plan is already the asset is earning revenue. Earning revenue, we are having history of that revenue, say last 1 year, say how much revenue I am getting that one. So based on that revenue and projections, future projections, we are able to arrive the NPV as on today. So that is the main difference, sir, in PPP and NMP. PPP is asset to be developed. In NMP, asset already developed and established revenue stream is there. That is the mainly difference, sir. So because of that one, that construction risk is avoided. Sir, any investor, as you know, sir, don't want to take any risk of construction risk. Because of that one, there may be chances of default in repayment of the loan. Whereas of NMP, asset is collecting the revenue. Of course, there are chances are there, like COVID time, revenue shortfall may be there. There will be some, with such type of situation, there is some mechanism to sort it out. So that is the main difference, sir. And regarding second one, I will tell you, sir, the FASTag, no, sir, already wherever this, whatever amount we are collecting to FASTag, no, that each toll plaza is linked to the respective, now through FASTag, we are, NHA is collecting the toll and some of the BOT concessionaires also collecting the toll. That toll plaza is linked to the toll plaza go to say TOT concessionaire, automatically in that system, they will change it, sir. That amount will go to the respective concessionaire only. And because you have already raised this FASTag may around 96% penetration is there across India, sir. So only 4% is still remaining. So excellent, good progress is there last 1 year, sir. And this valuation approach, sir, I will give you in detail, but we are using this capex only, sir. That means at present, when we are evaluating, sir, the valuation of the asset, we are finding out how much my capex is required for next year. Next, say 20 years, I'm going for, say, asset monetization. Next 20 years, what is my requirement for any capex, any operation and maintenance? That we are assessing technically how much amount is required. Based on that one, we are arriving the figure today, sir.
Okay. Thank you. I have just one more connected question.
Yes,
you see,
yes,
I remember when I was in the bank, UCO Bank, there were a lot of cases where all those cases where these rights were there with them, and they were converted into NPA accounts because you rightly mentioned that they couldn't complete the roads or something like that. But in the present situation, when this NMP projects would be coming, what kind of security they would be able to offer to the bank if suppose they have to take some loans? So is it only going to be future recoveries or what?
Actually, in TOT concession agreement, suppose for agreement is there for say 20 years. After say 3 years, because of some problem, if the concessionaire wants to terminate the project, termination agreement it is clearly says that the whatever balance amount is there for next 17 years, that will be paid to the concessionaire. So bank, whatever loan they are extending, they will have assurance of repayment.
Okay.
Termination, that concession agreement is built up like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Gopal sir, you want to ask something?
I mean, if, Mr. Rao, in fact, you have been explaining it very nicely. I may have missed that point regarding this infrastructure investment, the InvIT. Now, will it be available, for investment to individuals and institutional investors also? Is it going to be a part of the plan?
Sir, yes, sir. Actually, first InvIT, that is NHA InvIT, it is a private placement, sir. And the next, what are all the roads? Actually, next 3 years, we are going to add InvIT minimum 1,500. So, depending upon some of the issues will come for public also. So, the main core objective of InvIT is private. This is public participation, sir. because even small investors also can participate. If you take this one Power Grid Corporation also, they have issued on public placement only. NHAI also over a period of time will go for public issues.
No, that's a very good idea, but somehow, what has been the experience so far? What I understand is that, those who invested in InvIT units, so far they have not had a, very pleasant experience. Can you just deliberate on what possible could have been the reasons for that?
I do not have much idea, but the only thing I can tell you, sir, as far as NHAI InvIT is concerned, NHAI with NHAI brand image will get a stable return, sir. That much I can tell you, sir.
All right. Okay.
Because
okay.
NHAI brand image there, sir. Because that much I can tell.
No, I personally, I feel that, this idea is really very good under the circumstances, a wonderful alternative to the, disinvestments and all the controversies that are associated with it. My only apprehension is that, you need a very mature democracy to run on this kind, where you have such long-term commitments, and partnerships in the public and private. So that stable and mature democratic system, is going to be the foundation of the success of this type of a arrangement. Because as I said, that transparency is also one of the issues which has to be, ensured.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Punitji, if there are some other, members who want to ask
I think
questions.
one question that has come to me is regarding that whenever these TOT models are given and these tolls, etc., are operated by private players, it has been an experience that there are some by lanes which are developed for bypassing the toll roads. Is there any mechanism, because definitely industry has this question, so is there any mechanism for plugging these by lanes?
Actually, for each state, there will be state support agreement, sir. So we will have that state support agreement. It will protect such type of any deviations are there, sir. And another thing is there is a chance, as you said, for by lane, and a new project construction is difficult, sir, because it is very costly to develop NHAI. Each kilometer is about, say, depending upon the soil conditions and terrain, about 15 crores to 25 crores. Any state cannot, it is highly impossible to collect this one, sir. Construct new roads, whereas to protect such type of things, there is a state support agreement is there with the state governments.
So the private players are given the access to probably the state machinery for bringing these to the light of the state, and like that.
Yes.
Does it work like that?
The state support agreement is in sense there should not be any parallel roads, so that there should not be any leakage of revenue like that.
All right. Okay. Yes, sir. Anil sir, you want to?
Yeah, I have one more question. You see, as Rao Saab have just mentioned that all these assets are already operational. So what are your expectations? How a third party is going to come and increase the traffic increase the revenue on these already operational assets? What type of activities or what type of scope you have given to them to increase that revenue?
Sir, actually here the main objective of asset monetization is not to increase the revenue, sir. Automatically, because of the natural growth in the system economy, traffic will increase. But the main objective is to get the upfront amount over the concession period, not for increasing this. You see here, private operators main increasing the efficiency means maintaining the better roads. While operation and maintenance, they can better do it in that way. So not for this one, any increase in the revenue. Revenue is normal only. Main objective is getting the upfront amount right now.
So in the case of railway stations, earlier there were some experiments were done, and it was it was revealed at a later stage that there was so much disparity in various revenue streams which they could generate. For example, let's say these platform tickets. So they had a lot of discussions with them. So how it is going to are we going to pay higher toll for, let's say, going to Jaipur rather than going to Chandigarh, something like that? Is it or prices are going to be fixed?
Sir, actually, as I told you, no, sir, say when you have talked about the railway station and this one, no, sir, asset monetization, may toll roads. Yeah, toll roads, may the main thing is that whatever toll I'm collecting today, say 100 rupees, say from here to go from Delhi to Jaipur, still that 100 rupees will be with the concessionaire. There will not be any increase in the toll rate. Whereas in case of, say, platforms, railway stations, no, how they are fixing the rates when it is given for asset, I do not have idea. But as far as roads or assets are concerned, there is no increase in the toll rates. Same as it is, it will be there. And whatever Government of India guidelines are there for increasing the toll revenue yearly based on the growth, it will follow. Even toll notification also will be issued by government only. That is through NHA. If the concessionaire maintains that road also. So there is no abnormal increase or decrease in the toll revenue. Whatever system is there today we are following, it will be applicable in future also.
So one question, which a follow-up question concerning this amount. An attendee has asked that whether the revenue from operator is only, if the revenue from operator is only from toll, and assuming this will grow over a period, the operator will make profit out of it. So this is the question, sir.
No, actually, what for people are doing business? You see here, for example, we have expected say 5% growth. If the growth is 7%, that will be there. But however, there are some conditions in the, he rightly said, there are some conditions in the concession agreement. Suppose if the toll revenue increases by say some 10-15% more, he has to share some revenue to the NHA. Some safeguards are there.
All right. I think these were our questions,
Okay.
Mr. Rao. And
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to express whatever asset monetization, because the NHA is experienced in TOT already almost 3 years ho gaya. So we are doing it, and whatever Government of India plans are there, we are able to meet.
so definitely, Mr. Rao, so we have a man who is hands-on into this very field, and one of the, it is coming from the person who is probably pioneering this within the ministry and within the NHAI, which is the implementing body. And we got a lot of valuable guidance from you, Mr. Rao. And definitely this guidance will go a long way in highlighting to the professionals what can be the opportunities, what is that we can expect from the government. Because even as citizens, as BVSS, we keep on researching on these aspects, making representations and all. So after understanding these issues from people like you who have a lot of experience, we are able to have better internal discussions and then see what are the other things which are required to be done to align all these aspects, and wherever there are shortcomings, we can, as a think tank, pitch in. So we are really thankful to you for sparing your valuable time. And though you had mentioned to me that you would have to leave, I would still request, if time permitting, we have another extremely dynamic speaker, Mr. Abhinav Mittal, who has spent a lot of time in infrastructure working only within and outside India in a lot of countries in South Asia. He has a Southeast Asia experience. So if you can spare the time, I would request you. So,
I will take 1 more minute only. Luckily, I had an opportunity in NHMA. Earlier, some X used to look after InvIT, some Y used to look after TOT. Because in NHMA, I am the only CGM finance. I am looking after everything. InvIT, TOT, BOT, HAM, EPC, CO division, total all financial activities. So that is my God's given opportunity to lead such an organization, because our budget this year is 1,57,000 crores and so much of activities are there. So we are thinking that we are moving in a right direction. Whatever feedback is there now, you can give suggestions are most welcome. Definitely we'll implement over a period of time. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
And we would continue seeking your more active involvement, and wherever you think that we as BVSS can pitch in, and wherever we can support NHAI in some research work, etc., or some ground level feedback, we would be happy to share our views, Mr. Rao. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much. I will stay connected, no problem.
Thank you. So now with this, I request our second speaker. We have already introduced Mr. Abhinav Mittal. So I straight away go and request Mr. Abhinav to start his deliberation. And further, from a professional's perspective, what can we expect from asset monetization? What are the key issues that are involved, etc.? Mr. Abhinav.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Puneet. And again, very thanks to Mr. Rao for a very insightful session. So some of the things that he mentioned, I'm going to go in a little bit more detail about those concepts. So that is one. And more importantly, I'm going to focus on also other case studies. So we have seen what has happened in India, but what has happened in other countries and what are the learnings that we can actually take from there. So we'll also cover part of that as well. Mr. Puneet, I just want to confirm, I think you're able to see the screen, right? No issues at all.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, thanks. So this is an introduction about asset monetization. I think we have been, Mr. Rao has explained a lot. This is just a different way of putting at it. So yes, for any infrastructure project, there are multiple financing sources. So you can actually get loans from banks, which are commercial banks. You can raise bonds to fund that, or there are infrastructure funds, meaning these are investors who would want to help in development of infrastructure and ask for a long-term return. These are institutional investors like pension funds, etc. Now, these financing sources are primarily used for development of greenfield assets. When we say greenfield, that means either new assets or expansion of existing assets in which there's some construction needed. So another source of funds, essentially for this work, for this development of infrastructure, is through asset monetization of, there are two keywords, brownfield, revenue generating projects. So the assets that can be monetized, they need to be brownfield, meaning that the construction risk is over, it's an operation history, either 1 year or more, and these should be revenue generating. So asset monetization is, as a concept, is not applicable for any kind of infrastructure asset. There has to be, it has to be a revenue generating asset. So I have listed down what are the 4 key conditions that are needed for asset monetization. So the first being that it has to be an existing revenue generating asset in which the operation rights are transferred to the private sector or the investor in lieu of an upfront payment or a long-term lease payment. So that's an upfront payment that is made, and the proceeds have to be used to develop new or expansion of existing infrastructure. So these are the 4 key conditions. So in case you're actually given an asset to a private sector, there you have received the money, but that money again has to go in development of infrastructure only. It's not like you can use that money for something else. So that makes a key differentiation, as Mr. Rao also explained, that if you're meeting all these 4 conditions, then only it is asset monetization. In a PPP model, for example, the first condition is not satisfied because it's not an existing asset, it's a new asset that we develop. In a divestment, once the asset is sold, you are selling the entire asset. You're not only selling the operation rights. So the second condition is not satisfied, right? So we have to see that all these 4 conditions are satisfied, and then only it is called an asset monetization. Then in a summary, I think this is the whole cycle that is being shown here. So the first step, you have an existing asset. The first step is you divest that asset. You receive that money, and for that money, you reinvest into new infrastructure. And then again, that infrastructure can be recycled as an existing asset. So it's a continuous cycle. And once you develop any new infrastructure, you see it has become revenue generating. So then again, you can recycle that. So if as a government, for example, as NHAI, if they have to operate an asset, they have to operate it for 20 years. Now, assume that for first year, they monetize that asset and raised 100 crores. To take an example, you use that 100 crores to construct another road, which takes another 3 or 4 years. And then after that, you again monetize it after a year or so. Then again, you do that cycle. So within a period of 20 years, instead of just operating a road, you can actually monetize and raise money at least 5 times of that asset. So I think that's the power of compounding. That's the power of monetization that we want to see. And that is the whole concept why asset monetization pipeline in India has been created, because India as a country has huge infrastructure needs. And this model was initially thought of in Australia. It was called Asset Recycling Initiative in Australia. And now it has been passed on to other Asian countries like India, Indonesia, and we'll see some examples how it is being done. So the benefits of asset monetization, yes, I think it was already explained that it helps the government budget because the sold infra assets are brought back into the these sold infra assets, they remain in the tax base. So meaning that the assets are not transferred to the private sector. However, the government no longer pays for the maintenance and other expenses. All that is taken care by the private sector. There's an efficient maintenance of assets. It is beneficial to increase the capacity and number of government assets. So as I said, there's a multiplying effect. Within the same 20 years, you can actually develop 5 roads instead of just operating 1 road. And the government can get upfront payment, which is debt-free. So it reduces the burden of repayment. So you're not taking any debt on the balance sheet. You're getting upfront cash, which you can use for proceeds. So when a government entity like NHAI or any other entity has to develop new assets, they might have to take loans on their own balance sheet. But through this mechanism, that entire exercise is not needed. So there are certain limits, like if you see large government PSUs and all, there are always certain limits on how much debt they can take. So with this mechanism, those limits are not need to be considered because you're getting upfront money. So these are the key benefits there. I think one of the sessions were about professional opportunities. So I think I've just summarized here. Mr. Rao explained it really well again. So for financing, there are a lot of opportunities. One being that how you can structure and package these monetization assets. So when I say structuring, it means the number of assets, the length of kilometers that you're packaging, the location of those assets. So all that comes into play in terms of valuation. So the valuation would drive the structuring and packaging. The second thing is portfolio financial modeling. So I'm going to explain in a lot more detail about this particular concept, but when you do a financial modeling, it's particularly for one asset. It's a project finance modeling that people typically do in the industry. But from a portfolio modeling, what happens is that you have a single financial analysis tool to analyze multiple assets, maybe 10 assets, 20 assets, 50 assets. So you don't have to see different financial models for each asset. So you can actually incorporate everything in one model, and this is called a portfolio financial model. And I'll show you some examples in the later part of the session. So yes, other opportunities related to deal due diligence. So from a bidder's perspective, we can help them in diligence of the deal. Tax and accounting advisory always. And ongoing financial advisory. So even if the asset has been transferred or even after the asset has been monetized, there's a continuous opportunity for financial advisory. Okay, so the next section is about TOT model in India. It has been explained quite well, so I'm going to skip in a little bit more, in a brief manner through this section. So this is a summary of TOT till now. First highlight being there have been 5 bundles. So the way I use bundles is because there's not a single road in any asset that is monetized. There is a 2 roads or 3 roads, so that's called a bundle. So total 5 bundles were identified by NHAI and they have been tendered until March 2021 under this TOT scheme. And 3 bundles are upcoming, bundle number 6, 7, and 8. 20 years is the typical concession period. So in the first bundle, for example, it was a longer concession period of 30 years. But then, yes, as per industry feedback, it was said, okay, let's make it shorter because then it was easier for investors to actually realize returns and make projections in a much realistic manner because 30 years was a too long a period. So now it is set as 20 years, starting 2020. These are upfront lease payments. So as Mr. Rao mentioned, around 17,000 crores has been garnered till date through these upfront lease payments. And it's a rolling concession period. So I think one of the questions we raised about what if the tolls are blocked due to democracy, or like due to farmers' protest or anything like that, right? So, or what if the traffic increases to such a high extent that the concession is making undue profit? So I just want to highlight that based on the industry feedback, these are continuous changes in the concession agreement. And right now also it's a rolling concession period. So when I say rolling, it means that concession is taking a demand risk, yes, but if the actual traffic on the road is very high or it's very low, then this concession period is adjusted. So there's like 5 to 10% of the risk that is absorbed by the private sector. But if, for example, if the traffic increases to 20% or 25%, then accordingly the concession period is either reduced or there's a revenue share mechanism that comes into play. So these are the mechanisms that are being done in the concession agreement itself from a risk allocation perspective. So the key benefits of TOT scheme, you would see a lot of similarities in the asset monetization benefits. So it enables upfront payment of lease to fund other infra projects. It encourages private sector participation, and a lot of work is being done through reducing the size of the bundles so that a lot of people can actually participate. And you will see that trend in the next slide. And harness private sector innovation and efficiency. So I think here, I just want to highlight that once the private sector comes in, earlier in the earlier tolls, there were a lot of cash leakages because FASTag was not there. So the actual cash that is being collected and reported to some of these on these tolls was not the right figure. Through FASTag, a lot of improvements have been done in collection. It's automatic. There is less manual intervention and hence less leakages. Now, in terms of innovation efficiency, what private sector can bring in is other revenue streams, for example. So if you see the latest BOT concession agreements, for example, in Ganga Expressway or other projects, private sector can set up solar generation along the highway, right? There are other revenue generating avenues like petrol pumps or through other things. So we will see that some of these changes may also be incorporated in the upcoming NHAI bundles for TOT scheme, so that the private sector can actually increase their revenue within those contours of the concession agreement. This slide actually shows the timeline of how the TOT has evolved over the last 4 years or so. So the first bundle that was awarded was in August 2018, and it was for a length of 682 kilometers. And the bid concession fee was 9,681 crores. So that was the amount that was raised. The winner was a Macquarie Fund and Ashoka Buildcon Consortium. So as you can see earlier, there was an investor and an operator who came together to form a consortium to bid for that, each bringing their own strengths together. So that was bundle one. A bundle two, this bundle was meant for 566 kilometers, but it was cancelled because there was not enough bids received above the reserve price set up by NHAI. So in typically earlier TOT bundles, there was a reserve price that was arrived at based on NHAI's understanding of the valuation. That was the minimum price that the private sector had to bid for. But over the time, this has been now removed because the valuation may vary. So there's no minimum reserve price or benchmark set now. The third TOT bundle was awarded in November 2019. The length was again 566 kilometers and concession fee was 5,000 kilometers, which was winner was Cube Highways. So Cube Highways, again, an investor based out of Singapore. The entity is registered in Singapore, but they invest very heavily in Indian road assets. That's the core focus. Bundle 4 was 401 kilometers, which was cancelled. And bundle 5A1 and 5A2 was for 160 kilometers. So as you can see, it was awarded in March 21 and concession fee was 2,252 crores, 2,252 crores. So now, as you can see, these lengths earlier was 682, around almost 700 kilometers, then 500 kilometers, then 400 kilometers, and now 160 kilometers. So you can see there's a general decrease in the length of the bundles only because as a country, we want to actually encourage a lot more participation in these asset monetization models. So next slide, it lists out the 3 bundles. Mr. Rao also showed the same information. I've just collated the lengths together. So 108, 135, and 206. So these are the 3 bundles that are coming up. And I think in future also the bundles that the sizes that we would see would be in the similar range, 150 to 200 kilometers. That would be the typical range of TOT bundles. Okay. Right. So the next topic on the agenda was around NMP. A lot of members have spoken about that. What is NMP? There have been some figures also discussed. And I just want to kind of reiterate some of that number to put in the context of road infrastructure. and also see what are the upcoming things that we can expect. What are the upcoming PPP models that we can expect in terms of TOT. So this slide shows an overview of NMP. It was published in August 21, and it accounts for around 5.4% of the total investment for NIP. So there are two documents that have been recently published by Government of India. One is NMP that we're talking about, which is National Monetization Pipeline. But also there is National Infrastructure Pipeline, which is called NIP. So NIP is defines what is the need for infrastructure in India over the next 5 years. And that need is 111 lakh crores. So you see this figure, 111 lakh crores is the amount required for investment in NIP over the next 5 years till FY25. And out of that 111, 6 lakh crores is expected to be raised through NMP. So as you can see, 6 lakh crores is a very big amount, but compared to the actual infra needs that we have in the country, it's still 5.4%. And once this model is successful, if we are able to actually do a lot more monetization, then this can be then compounded into more projects. In NMP, transport and energy, these are the two major sectors that have been identified. When I say transport, that includes roads, but also railways, airports. We have talked about railway station PPPs as well. So all that is, existing railway station, how to actually monetize that land. In energy also, there are a lot of assets that are owned by government agencies, how they can be monetized. This includes transmission assets, power generation assets. This is the entire energy framework, including renewable energy as well. So those are the two major sectors that will be monetized over the next 5 years. And so these are this graph shows the various budgetary sources. So how would you meet, what is the expectation of the government to meet this 6 lakh crores? So around 44% would come from budgetary sources. But I mean by this that there's a possibility that a lot of actually these assets, when they are monetized, they be monetized within the same government agencies as well. So that is also a possibility, right? 40% is through private or extraordinary budget sources. So this is the way that 40% of the amount is being expected to raise through pure private capital, and 16% is raised through innovative or alternate financing sources. So innovative financing might be in terms of credit enhancement guarantees, might be in terms of blended finance, in terms of other smaller social impact funds that may come in to raise these budgetary sources. Okay, so the next slide, this is again a continuation of NMP only. So in NMP, they have 5 monetization models that have been defined. There are 2 models for brownfield PPP concession. The third model is for lease, and then there are investment trusts. So in the earlier presentation, we have spoken a lot about InvIT. So that is one structure under the investment trust. The other structure is called REIT. So REIT stands for Real Estate Investment Trust, and this is specifically meant for real estate transactions. This is not meant for other infrastructure. So those are investment trusts. The TOT model that we spoke about earlier, this name itself, that when you say toll operate transfer, this name might change to something called operate maintain transfer, OMT. So this is the new term that has been used in the NMP. So under this operate maintain transfer structure, an operational asset which has the potential for immediate revenue collection is handed over to the private party for O&M over the concession period. So as you can see, the definition is exactly very similar to what we have in the TOT. So going forward, there's a possibility that once these 8 bundles are completed, this term might be used, because this is the new term that has been defined in the asset monetization, but the essence remains the same. And then the other model for brownfield is OMD, which is operate, maintain, develop. So the only difference, one key difference between OMT and OMD is that once a concession is given under OMD scheme, the private sector also has to invest money for augmentation of that asset. So a core part or a core responsibility of the concessionaire or the private sector is also to develop that asset for further augmentation or expansion. So for example, in the road infrastructure, you can assume that there's a 4-lane road already existing, and it is given under OMD model to actually make it to 6-lane. So it's not purely operations of 4-lane road, but to also expand, invest additional capex to make it a 6-lane road. So that's OMD. Lease is essentially it's lease is very different from OMD because that's not upfront payment. So in lease, an operating asset might be given to a private sector and the payments are received over time. So it may not be always upfront payment. This is mainly used for telecom sector where the telecom towers or etc. They're given the operation rights of that are given to the private sector. And in return, the government gets a fixed payment every year or on regular intervals. On InvIT, I just want to kind of highlight a few numbers that may be very interesting for the speakers and the participants here. Number one, that it was introduced in 2014. So it is not a very new model. However, the pace of InvITs have rapidly increased over the last couple of years, or at least in the last year, because we see a lot more people coming up with InvITs. So, but it was an old model introduced in 2014. InvITs are governed by SEBI regulations. So whether it's private sector or public sector, they have to be listed on SEBI. So it's not like anyone can come with InvIT. There has to be a proper investment banker who has to develop these documents for you and assist you in the listing of these InvITs, even if it's a private placement. So it's governed by SEBI regulations, and these regulations have been changing over time. And the latest was announced only a couple of years back. So with all the changes. So that is the second number. And the third is that right now in India, there are around 9 active InvITs with a total asset under management, which we call AUM of 1.4 lakh crores. So some of the initial transport InvITs were through Oriental Infra, or you must have heard of Highways Concession. In power, it was IndiGrid. So all these InvITs were earlier one of the first few InvITs that were established. And now you see even government agencies like NHAI, Power Grid coming up with their own InvITs. So sector contribution, so roads account for around 38.5%, telecom 32%, gas pipeline 11%, power 17%, and fiber optic, very small portion of 1%. So these are the distribution of existing InvITs in the country. But going forward, it can be expected that transport and energy will take a much bigger picture and other sectors will be left behind, because these are the two assets which have very, very defined cash flow streams. So that's about NMP. Now within NMP, I'm actually deep diving into the particular model that we talked about, which is called OMT model, or the new name of TOT, right? So under this model, around 26,700 kilometers of stretches are planned to be monetized over the next 5 years. And the amount to be raised is around 1.6 lakh crores. That's the amount envisaged to be raised. And within so in NMP, if you open the document, it's a very interesting read. It has been developed by Niti Aayog. It's a very interesting. There are 2 volumes to it. They have not actually defined individual stretches of roads right now, but they have given an approximate idea of what are the stretches and kilometers that we can expect to be monetized. So they have given a breakup of 26,700 into these 4 regions. So North region being 1361 kilometers, East 1478, West 2031, South 1931. So all these figures can be seen in the NMP document as well. And this is just a broad distribution how these would be done. The exact list of assets would be decided by the relevant government agency, which is NHAI in this case, and it would be published over a period of time. Here, I have just summarized what are the key terms of this OMT concession. This is very important to know, because once these monetizations start happening going forward, they would be under the OMT model. So if you see these first requirement, yes, it has to be an operational asset, which is very obvious. Potential projects, they would be the newly constructed projects, like which have been commissioned recently through EPC mode, or it was originally tendered out through PPP, but the concession has either been terminated or it is complete. So if it's an old 15-year asset for which concession period has been completed and the asset has now reverted back to the government, then it can be also used for monetization. So these are 2 potential projects. We see a larger number of projects being in the first category, which are either newly constructed or they are already existing assets but owned by NHAI automatically. Because PPP in India, there are very few projects for which the concession period is complete. There might be terminations, but concession period completion is a very few projects. then primary obligations are of the private sector would be to own, operate and maintain these assets and provide services to user against the predetermined regulated or market-based fee. So I think in this case, there was a question here that how would the fee be decided? So I just want to clarify that for NHAI tolls, all the tolls that are maintained by the NHAI, the fees as regulated. There's a fee notification that is published on a per kilometer basis, and the rates are as per that. So the private sector doesn't have that flexibility to increase rates or decrease rates or to modify those rates. That's not possible. So it's a predetermined regulated fee in case of road infrastructure. So the market-based fee may be applicable for other subsectors like maybe maybe airports or ports. There might be market-based fee if there's not a fee regulation. But we see that if there's a revenue generating asset, most likely it's a predetermined regulated fee for some of these assets. Investor class. So we have talked about this. These might be either strategic investors. So we have these huge infra funds like KKR, Brookfield, CDPQ who are coming into India from international countries and investing money here. So that is one sector. That is one category. And the other category is infrastructure developers themselves. So if there are developers who are in the near vicinity of that road and who say, okay, if I take over the road, I can actually maintain it very efficiently. It makes a part of my portfolio. So developers is other category who would want to come in. Or if they can see that there are other avenues on how they can use those operation rights. The selection, very transparent through competitive bidding process and as per the prescribed guidelines by the government. And other terms are standard as per in terms of PPP projects. So the risk allocation is quite fair, no issue. So this has been a very successful model till in road sector, and we see this OMT model now coming into other places as well. So. So again, I think this diagram explains the contractual framework of OMT. So there are three key players. One is the public authority, investors, and the asset itself, which may be the SPV or the asset rights. So as I said, the public authority would get a consideration from investors, and they would give the O&M concession to investors. This public authority right now has the asset rights, which are then the O&M rights are transferred to the investors. So I think there's a distinction. The ownership of the asset remains with the public authority. Only the operation rights are transferred, and investors get the project revenue rights as well. So all the project revenue also comes to the investors. So consideration can be upfront or annual premium, or in form of revenue share. Concession period minimum 10 years. So as per the NMP, it's recommended that the concession period is minimum 10 years. However, in roads, we have seen 20 years to be the typical range. O&M concession is responsible. Project revenue, the concession has to take the market risk and collect revenue through the toll fee. Okay. So we have talked about NMP, we have talked about TOT in India, we've talked about OMT. So as I said, we also want to see what has been happening in other countries. Not, what are the learnings that we can take from other countries as well. I'm going to discuss not only the successful case studies, I'm also going to discuss the unsuccessful case study. And you will be surprised the country in which that has happened. Yeah. So first, let's talk about Australia. The reason I took Australia first is because Australia has this initiative called ARI. You can see it here. It's called Asset Recycling Initiative. Australia is the first country which thought about asset monetization in early 2010s or so. So it was around 2011-12, they thought about asset monetization. And they mentioned this initiative ARI. And within Australia, they are also, like in India, we have different state governments. So even in Australia, you have these different state governments, Northern Wales and North South Wales and etc. So they mandated that any development that has to be done by these provincial governments, 15% of that fund has to come through ARI. So it was in a sense that these states were encouraged that you need to recycle at least your existing assets so that as to raise 15% of your total fund requirement. So that was a policy that was designed under ARI. Now this is a highway called West Connex Highway. So the New South Wales government in Australia, they sold stake in West Connex project under the Asset Recycling Initiative. And 51% stake was sold. So I just want to highlight a difference here. So initially, it was not 100% stake sold. So they said, okay, I will transfer 51% of the stake, and I will get the upfront money for 42-year concession. So 51% sold, 9.3 billion Australian dollars was the amount paid to acquire the stake, and it was a 42-year concession period. It was a much longer concession period earlier. So this enabled the state government to manage the financing of the project and fund the construction of later stage of the scheme. So as I said, one core part of this asset monetization is that the funds that are received, they are plowed back into either expansion or construction of new assets, which is what happened in this case. This is the logo of the company that won the bid. Sorry, just one second. So this is the second model, which is called LCS, Limited Concession Scheme, and this is in Indonesia. This is a very new scheme. It's not like it's something very old. This is just published a couple of years back, in fact, last year only. And again, Indonesia as a country needs investment in infrastructure. It's a large country and they have their own problem because it's an island country. So they need that infrastructure development. And this was designed, the scheme was notified as an alternative to PPP scheme. So under this, as an alternative to existing PPP scheme, the government of Indonesia introduced new LCS, Limited Concession Scheme. Under this scheme, the concessionaire will have operating rights, but the ownership of assets stays with the enterprise. So you can see how much similarity is there. So this is actually the asset monetization model we talked about. It's just a different name. So Limited Concession Scheme, LCS, is an asset recycling model. It involves the use of existing public sector assets to access private financing. So here, again, the focus is the same. It's an existing assets. It's a revenue generating asset. You need more capital, but for some reason you are not able to raise it. That's why you give the operation rights of these existing assets to a private sector who would give you upfront payment, and you can use that to fund your new infrastructure. So it's exactly the same. If you see them, yes, if you go into a little bit more detail how the regulations have involved and everything, you would see some differences in the risk allocation. But this is a very similar scheme that we talked about, which is called asset monetization. So again, you can see the structure. There's a state enterprise, and this is, if you can see, if you remember, we talked about OMT framework. So again, 3 players: state-owned enterprise, the private sector, which is the LCS entity, which gives the upfront fees. The ownership of the LCS asset remains with the state-owned enterprise, and LCS entity gets the operation rights and the operation revenue. And in Indonesia, the LCS scheme, there are few sectors already defined. So these are the symbols for these sectors. You have ports, airports, roads, railway lines, water, waste management, telecom infrastructure, and energy. So this is a much larger list of assets. In my experience, and even if you see the industry experience for monetization, monetization is more successful in sectors like transport and energy. So water management, waste management, because these are public utilities, these are social utilities. And in Asia, in Asian countries, these services are almost free in most of the countries. So basically, even if you pay for your water, or even if you pay for waste management, it's a very minimal charge. In India, there are very few states which charge you for waste management. It's usually a part of your property tax. So there's no specific waste management fee. So in countries where these are defined revenue streams for these assets, then this is much more successful. So there has to be a operating asset, that's fine, but there has to be revenue defined. It's a revenue generating asset. That is a key for monetization. And the third is Indiana Toll Road Concession. This is in USA, and actually this was not successful. So in 2006, the state of Indiana privatized a major east-west highway, which is called Illinois-Indiana Toll Road, also known as Indiana East-West Toll Road. So this was the asset that was monetized. This was actually given, again, all the operation rights were transferred, and it was for a much longer period. It was a 75-year concession that was given. This was the longest that we have seen in terms of concession periods. It was a 156 miles highway, which runs through northern Indiana, connecting the states of Ohio and Illinois. $3.8 billion was raised through this bid. by the government, and they were given a 75-year concession. So, you can actually take it as similar to when you have these 99-year leases on your real estate projects in India. So you have given the land for a 99-year lease, and which may get, extended. So similarly here, always the plan was, although the asset, the land itself, the rights are with the government, but it's as if the government, the private sector can do anything. They can develop that area, they can do operations. So all the operation rights were given on the lease payment. Now, in 2006, this happened. However, when private sector came in, they started operating the bid. There were major loopholes in the valuation. So I think we have spoken in the earlier session why valuation of these assets are important. And typically, when we do valuations as a firm, as an advisor, you would actually look at 3 triangulation of valuation. So you have this market approach. Basically, you see what is the market multiple, what is the transaction multiple that's happening based on the market approach. You have DCF, which is discounted cash flow valuation. And then you also have the capex mechanism. So what is the cost for building the same highway today? So I think this triangulation is important. However, there was some mistake in the valuation. That's why the foreign owned operator of this road, they filed for bankruptcy around 2014. So in less than 10 years, they filed for bankruptcy, around 8 years. And then this asset was actually sold to another concessionaire. IFM investors, they came in and they acquired the toll road concession from these guys. So they transferred the rights and they paid some money to get into that. So I think that's how it was done. So they didn't recover the full 3.8 billion, but yes, they were able to recover some part of it, which they paid to the government. So this was not actually a very successful model. And I think the major cause in my view was regarding the concession period itself, because if you give such a very long concession, it's very difficult to project the revenues over a period of time. So I think it's very important to have the sizing of the asset right. When we talk about structuring the deal itself, the sizing, the market that you're targeting, and the concession period, etc. So I think these are the 3-4 key factors that you have to look at. Okay, so okay, we have still 10 minutes. I'll just very briefly talk about portfolio financial modeling. This is the last item on the agenda. So this is very interesting because as advisors, when you do financial modeling, typically we have seen that model is being done for one asset at a go. And if you have 10 assets, you build 10 different models to understand these assets. So what we do is in the portfolio modeling, we actually combine these assets into a single model. So, and these are the key considerations for a portfolio level financial model, which is very useful for developers who have multiple assets, or for government agencies like NHAI who have multiple assets, for investors who want to acquire a portfolio of assets. So this is very useful for them. So yes, you follow the best practices of modeling. So that is always the case, that there has to be clear separation between inputs, outputs, consistent formulae, linearity, and there has to be no complex macros. So this key part of this modeling is historical data. So this model provides you a bridge between historical information as per the actual accounts and projected cash flows. So very similar to what you would build for an acquisition. And the correct reflection of historical data would assist in your analysis of cash flows over time. So you have acquired an asset which had a 2-year operation history. Now, after 2 years of operating that asset, the things have changed again. So you update these historicals again in the model, and it will give you what is the readjusted cash flows for future again. So to give an example, if you acquired an asset assuming a 10% revenue growth, but after 2 years, you see it's only 8%. So then future also needs to be adjusted from 10 to 8% or accordingly. What are the growth rates that you have assumed? So that's why historical bridging is more important here. A cash flow waterfall, that's an integral part of a model where you want to see that as an investor or as a developer, how much money you are getting. Covenant testing. So if in case there are any debt, there would be debts on the SPV level, on the asset level. So whether these debts are being met, are there any negative cash balances that are coming in certain periods? DESRA and dividend distribution tests need to be incorporated. Investor returns, meaning to do IRR calculation sensitivities, and tax and accounting. So it's very important to take care of relevant taxes affecting the investor returns. For foreign players, it also becomes other things like withholding tax, also becomes important. Dividend distribution tax also becomes important when they take other returns from that project. And we have seen this model being developed by government agencies as well. because when they want to take out any bundle out in the market, they want to see that what would be the indicative pricing that they might get. So they would do this model in-house to see what is the valuation that they are coming up with, and then see what is the market responding. So there's which is called a public sector comparator. We call it PSC. It is done for all the bids, and similarly, it can be done for NHAI bundle, toll bundles, and monetization bundles as well. Right. So these are some of the best practices that need to be followed for any modeling. So linearity, it has to be considered in a linear manner. Integrity, the model should not break down if you change anything, because there are a lot of changes over time. So the model should be robust enough that it carries that. Documentation is very important, because if you develop any financial model for clients, this model flows to multiple mechanisms. So there might be multiple people who might be using it. So a documented process of how to use the model, what are the key assumptions, that's important. And robustness. As I said, it should not break down when you change inputs. So I think this is, how it looks like. You have, if you see this diagram, you would see that these are the different assets that we have listed down. So they're like, you can see 5 assets that are there right now. And these are the assumptions for each asset. So in a single sheet, you can actually see assumptions for each asset. And then you have these data visualizations to see what are the cash flows coming over time. So why there are variations here. So this is just one illustration. And similarly here. So this is the consolidation sheet, wherein you would actually want to consolidate that what is your returns, what is your balance sheets and everything, what is the cash flow that you're getting on a consolidated basis at the portfolio level. Yeah, I think that's all from my side.
So I think, Abhinavji, your presentation was really loaded with lots of information, and we were able to know several things, several details regarding this asset monetization, including the interesting parts of the document which have been prepared by the Niti Aayog. And I think these are exciting times when the government of India is really concentrating a lot on infrastructure and investment. And we all understand that infrastructure has to form the backbone or the basis for future industrial and economic development. India almost eyeing at around 7 or rather 8+% compounded growth year after year for few years to come. I think the plan looks pretty impressive and opens up lots of opportunities for us, namely the professionals and those who are into the field, helping the players who are into this various implementation of these aspects. Definitely lots of key legal, taxation, accounting, financial, planning, contractual, all these issues would keep arising. And I take home at least one very important point which Mr. Rao was emphasizing a lot, that we must understand and know what the contract is. Because after all, if a person invests in any project, he may be requiring money, or he may have more lucrative opportunities when he wishes to get out of that, and someone else thinks that it could be an opportune moment. And for that, we need to have a lot of understanding of the contracts. And one very interesting takeaway I would further take, which again fell from him, was that we must, as professionals, be able to suggest what are the improvements which may be further made in various of these aspects, especially the contracting part. I think these are all evolving issues, and Abhinavji, your international experience would definitely add a lot of value to how these things can be implemented and how these things can be further augured and improved. So with this,
Puneet, can I want
Yeah, Mr. Rao,
I will not take only. I will take 1 minute.
Yeah, please.
I think around 38 participants are there. Most of them professionals also, like CS and all those things. My advice to them is, let us have interdisciplinary approach. Let us not restrict themselves to this one, because this is very, very, very important. You can have success if you have interdisciplinary approach only. That means, say some chartered accountant is there, he should have knowledge about the company secretary, he should have knowledge about the contract management, arbitration, he should have knowledge about the law. So that is very, very, very important in this one, because if you engage somebody, we expect that minimum this one is there. I will tell myself, I am actually BTech civil engineer. I am an MTech industrial engineering, and I completed postgraduate diploma in computer applications. I worked in SAP Finance. That means we have implemented SAP Finance in our industry in 14 years back. I had 5 years experience in implementation of SAP Finance, HR module, materials management, sales and distribution, and marketing also. I am ICW All India 48 rank, and I'm a company secretary also. So what I mean to say, this especially CA professionals, most of them may be CA professionals, they should have knowledge, and if possible, if they are young people, let them acquire the company secretaryship also, because many opportunities there for finance professional having interdisciplinary qualifications. Again, insisting interdisciplinary qualification mean company secretary, arbitration related, valuation, law. So that is my advice. Thank you.
I think you made a very good point, and all these, whenever we are talking about magnitude of this, we need to have more and more knowledge, bandwidth, information, the coverage, and this is a very valuable guidance indeed. So if any participant has any questions, you may kindly put in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we will be raising that question to the August panel. I think as such, I have not received. Vipin sir, you have any question?
Mr. Abhishek, Akhilesh ji wants to ask a question. He has raised hand.
Please go
Akhilesh
ahead.
ji, please ask the question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Abhinav, you have mentioned regarding the blended source of finance, whether CSR activities may be the part of it. That is the one question. And secondly, you have mentioned the valuation thing, whether valuation approach, how much it is near perfect, and is there any adjustment in the future, say 5 years onwards or 10 years onwards, because that valuation may not be the perfect, as I think.
Okay. So coming to the first question regarding the CSR funding as part of blended, I just want to say that infrastructure needs are quite huge. So these are very big projects that we're talking about in terms of monetization, in terms of raising funds. And CSR funds are typically meant for creating social impact on the lives of individuals. So at least in my experience, I've not seen CSR funds coming into development for, at least for monetization. So CSR funds are definitely used for greenfield projects in terms of waste management or healthcare. That those are the sectors that are targeted in which new developments are being done. So new projects are being built. So those are the right category for the usage of those funds. Monetization is, we have seen typically either investors, strategic investors who want to earn some return on their existing amount or existing fund, or developers who see that if they acquire some asset, they have some operational synergy. So there are two key categories that are being coming on. When I talked about blended finance, these are upcoming small funds or maybe credit enhancement guarantees. So for example, if there's a bond to be raised, but that bond is you list it in the market. However, there are not a lot of takers for that bond. So if you raise it in an international market from a country like India, you might need credit enhancement facilities. So once you do that credit enhancement of that bond, you back that bond by a very reputed firm or reputed credit enhancement agency, then there are much more takers for the bond, and you can get raise much more funds. So that's why these blended finance mechanisms, they have that capability to multiply your financing. So I think that's what I referred. On the second part on valuation approach, valuation as a concept is at a point in time. So if you talk about large investors who invest in these infra assets, almost all the investors, they do an annual valuation exercise for all their assets, because valuations do change over time, right? So at the point on which you are actually getting out this asset for monetization, at that point in time, a valuation is done by any investor. Now, if the market conditions change very drastically, of the toll revenue has been decreased, for example, or it has been increased by a certain amount, then there are certain safeguard puts in the concession agreement itself, or the what we call as risk allocation, so that there are some safeguards so that the valuation is not deteriorated to a very large amount. It's not eroded very rapidly. So those safeguards can be put. But yes, valuation as an exercise is done at a point in time, and you can do it again and again, on a every annual basis or so. And you can then ask for some representation or some changes in the concession agreement if it falls in the change in law, but it has to be within the contours of the concession agreement.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I have one question from both Abhinavji and Mr. Rao. Typically, when we are talking about the monetization of these assets and the rates of return on these assets, may be in a broad spectrum. They would not be considered to be returns when a person does business, or they may not be commensurate with the returns which a person gets while he is into, for example, equity market, whatever is the expectation. So, Mr. Rao, would it be from an investor's perspective, does he see these as returns where more or less like debt plus delta, or what is the benchmarks for the investors who are investing, and what would be the typical class of investors within India who would actually be investing in this exercise where you are, for example, issuing InvITs? Mr. Rao, you are on mute.
InvIT may actually, at this stage, I cannot disclose. Let us wait for some time. InvIT investors can already issue.
Asking about the names, I am saying who would typically be the class of investors who, for example, would they be fund houses?
Fund houses like pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and India may lay, for example, LIC, EPFO, SBI ka trustee, they're like that.
All right. So they would be looking at these like from a debt plus delta kind of a return perspective, Mr. Rao?
Of course, this one, like that.
All right. Mr. Mittal, would you like to add anything on this?
Yeah, so I think, so when these InvITs or when these monetizations were initially in the country, there was a lot of interest from a lot of foreign pension funds, or what we call as foreign institutional investors, which include infra funds, pension funds, wealth funds, as Mr. Rao said. And the reason being that these pension funds, they have a certain amount to be paid out to their pensioners over time period, right? So like, for example, when we have in India also, there's these pensions to be paid out to government employees. Now, there's an exercise called, which was actuarial exercise, based on which you determine which is a minimum rate of return you need on your existing assets under management, or what we call AUM, to be able to pay these pensions over a very long period of time. So you arrive at a certain rate, right? Now, if these assets, if these monetization assets, you are able to actually earn a return which is above that hurdle rate or threshold return, then you would do that, right? Now, in some of the very advanced economies like Japan, Canada, Middle East, for example, where a lot of these people were coming in earlier, those in their home countries, they were getting rates of around 2 to 3%, at max, because in developed economies, you don't get such kind of returns on investments. But then if you go to these assets, first of all, these are operating assets. There's no risk. It's a very defined bankable asset, because there's a concession agreement signed. It's a bankable, the bankability is high. So then they are able to return a higher returns compared to the 2 or 3% that they're targeting. So even if you get 7%, 8%, even if you include the currency risk, it's a pretty decent number that they get. So I think that is one of the drivers which we see a lot of foreign institutional investors. From an Indian investor, again, as you see over the time period, some of these toll, because of FASTag implementation and a few other initiatives that have been taken by the government of India, we see a lot of increase in these revenues coming out of at least the toll assets. So there are these initiatives that are being done on a continuous basis in the country through which these returns are being enhanced over a period of time. So then that's why in future we see a lot more participation from Indian players as well, who would come in like LIC, EPFO, yes, but also developers who would come in to take these assets to own those returns. So, and if you actually combine portfolios, then so assume, like, if you see especially in road sector, these are given out in packages. So package 1, package 2, package 3. There might be 600-kilometer road which is broken into packages. Now, if someone already has package 1 in their plate and they own package 3, so if package 2 comes up for monetization, they would easily want to grab it because there's no additional operational cost and they're getting the additional revenue out of it, right? So it really depends on the location. So for developers, these considerations would matter when they acquire an asset.
Thank you, Abhinavji. I think with this, we have come to the end of today's program. And it was a really insightful, interesting, future-oriented, and giving a lot of insights to the professionals that what can be the further professional opportunities. So before summing up and inviting our senior executive board member Akhilesh ji for giving vote of thanks, I would only say 2-3 things about the programs, upcoming programs. On 12th, we have a program on decoding fundraising. So again, a field of knowing more and opening up more professional opportunities. On 19th, we have a program on Benami and money laundering. And continuing today's series where we had discussed infrastructure sector, one of the key aspect of today's infrastructure development, where today we found out that there is asset monetization, the amount that is received is again pumped up. Now that money that is being received by asset monetization, how it is being used by a model which we call as the hybrid annuity model. So we will be shortly having a program even on that. So, and Abhinavji, thanks for your time. You gave us a lot of time, and we would request you that whenever you have, you give us time, subsequently we would request you to again come and enlighten our participants and the professionals.
Very happy to. Very happy to. Thank you.
So Akhilesh ji, I invite you for giving a formal vote of thanks. Thank you.
अखिलेश जी म्यूट पे हैं आप।
अखिलेश जी आप म्यूट पर हैं।
Thank you, Puneet ji. I extend my thankfulness on behalf of BVSS and the whole team to the learned speaker of today, Mr. B.M. Rao and Mr. Abhinav Mittal, for their detailed and very insightful deliberations. Really, it was a new subject, and for me, it was a very, very new. But after attending this session, I think there is a very, very important sector, and I congratulate BVSS for choosing this topic. And with this, I extend my thankfulness to Mr. Rajiv Singh, advisor, our corporate and governance group, Mr. Yogesh Mahajan, CEO, Gower Construction Limited, Mr. Bipin Agarwal, our president, Mr. Rohit Vaswani, past president, and I will be failing in my duty if I don't extend my thankfulness to Sri Anil Sharma ji and Sri Gopal Arora ji, because of them, we have extracted maximum from the speakers. Otherwise, the speakers give their deliberation in a rhythm. It is the questions, the type of questions, the quality of questions which we are able to get maximum from the speakers. And thank to the Puneet Agarwal ji for organizing in such a decent manner, such a wonderful manner. Thank Puneet ji, over to you.
At the end, I thank all the participants for joining us and for remaining with us throughout the program. We look forward to meet all of you in our subsequent programs. Thank you. Namaskar.